Marcus Williams wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked through the factory doors. It was his third week working at Henderson Manufacturing Company, and the summer heat was getting worse every day. At 22 years old, Marcus was tall and quiet, with kind eyes and strong hands that showed he was not afraid of hard work. He needed this job badly. College was expensive, and he had one more year left to finish his engineering degree. His parents had offered to pay for everything, but Marcus wanted to do it himself. He believed that working for his money would make him a better person. His father had always taught him that nothing in life comes free, and hard work was the only way to truly succeed. The factory was loud and busy when Marcus arrived that Tuesday morning. Machines hummed and workers moved quickly between the production lines. Henderson Manufacturing made equipment for farmers, big machines that helped plant crops and harvest food. It was good work, and Marcus felt proud to be part of it, even if it was just for the summer. Marcus worked in the maintenance department with 5 other men. Most of them were older and had worked at the factory for many years. They were nice enough to Marcus, but they saw him as just another college kid, trying to make some quick money. They did not know how much he really understood about machines and engineering. Every day after work, Marcus would stay late in the break room with his engineering books. He studied hydraulic systems, computer programming, and mechanical design. The other workers thought he was wasting his time, but Marcus loved learning how things worked. He had always been good with his hands and his mind. Jake Morrison was the plant supervisor, a short man with gray hair who had been at the company for 15 years. He liked Marcus because the young man always showed up on time and never complained about any job, no matter how dirty or difficult it was. Jake had seen many summer workers come and go, but Marcus was different. He paid attention to everything and asked smart questions. That Tuesday started like any other day. Marcus was cleaning near the main production line when he heard a loud, grinding noise followed by a sharp bang. The biggest machine on the factory floor, a huge automated assembly unit, suddenly stopped working. The silence that followed was scary because everyone knew what it meant. The machine was worth more than $2 million and was the heart of the entire operation. When it stopped, everything else had to stop too. Workers stood around looking, worried, while supervisors ran back and forth with worried faces. Jake Morrison appeared within minutes, talking quickly into his radio and calling for the repair technicians. Marcus watched from a distance as 3 technicians arrived with their toolboxes. These were the experts, men who had been fixing machines for decades. They opened panels and looked at computer screens, their faces getting more confused by the minute. The machine had multiple problems, and none of them could figure out what was wrong. Within an hour, word spread through the factory that the big boss was coming down to the floor. Richard Henderson, the company owner and chief executive officer, rarely visited the production area. He was a man in his 50s who wore expensive suits and drove a luxury car. Everyone knew he had started the company 20 years ago with just a small loan and had built it into one of the biggest manufacturers in the state. When Henderson arrived, his face was red with anger. He looked at the broken machine and then at the technicians who were still trying to figure out the problem. Marcus could hear him talking loudly about lost money and angry customers. Every hour the machine was down cost the company thousands of dollars. Henderson walked around the machine asking questions that the technicians could not answer. His voice got louder and more frustrated with each passing minute. He pointed at different workers and asked them what they knew about the problem. Most of them just shook their heads and looked at the ground. Marcus was standing nearby, holding a mop and trying to stay out of the way. He had been watching the machine carefully and listening to the sounds it made before it stopped working. Something about the way it had failed seemed familiar to him from his engineering classes, but he was just a maintenance worker. Nobody would want to hear his ideas. Henderson noticed Marcus standing there and walked over to him. The older man looked angry and impatient, like he was ready to blame anyone for the problem. "You there?" Henderson said, pointing at Marcus. "Stop standing around doing nothing. Make yourself useful and help these technicians with whatever they need. Get them tools, clean up their mess, whatever they tell you to do." Marcus nodded politely. "Yes, sir." Henderson did not wait for any other response. He turned back to the technicians and continued asking them questions they could not answer. Marcus put down his mop and walked over to where the men were working. For the next 2 hours, Marcus fetched tools and held flashlights, while the technicians tried different solutions. He listened carefully to everything they said and watched everything they did. Slowly, he began to understand what was wrong with the machine. The technicians thought the problem was mechanical, something broken inside the machine that needed to be replaced. But Marcus could see from the error codes on the computer screen that the real problem was in the software. The machine's brain was confused, not its body. He wanted to say something, but he knew his place. He was just a summer worker, a college student who cleaned floors and carried tools. These men were the experts with years of experience. Who was he to tell them they were looking in the wrong place? As lunchtime approached, the technicians were getting more frustrated. They had taken apart half the machine and still could not find anything broken. Henderson came back 3 times, each time looking angrier than before. The production line had been down for almost 6 hours, and everyone knew the company was losing a lot of money. During lunch break, most of the workers went to the cafeteria, but Marcus stayed near the machine. He looked at the computer screen again and studied the error messages. His engineering classes had taught him about similar systems, and he was almost certain he knew what was wrong. The machine was not broken. It was just confused. A small part of its computer program had gotten mixed up, and that was causing all the problems. Marcus thought he might be able to fix it, but he would need to use his laptop and some programming skills he had learned in school. He looked around to make sure nobody was watching, then quietly approached the machine's computer terminal. Marcus looked around the empty factory floor. Most workers were in the cafeteria eating lunch, and the technicians had gone outside to smoke cigarettes and complain about the broken machine. This was his chance to take a closer look at the computer system without anyone asking questions. He pulled out his laptop from his backpack and connected it to the machine's diagnostic port. The screen filled with numbers and codes that would look like nonsense to most people. But Marcus had studied these systems in his engineering classes. He knew how to read the language of machines. The error messages told a clear story. The machine's main computer program was working fine, but a smaller program that controlled the hydraulic system had gotten corrupted. It was like having a perfectly good car with a broken radio that somehow stopped the engine from running. The technicians had been looking for broken parts when the real problem was invisible. Marcus spent 30 minutes writing a new piece of code on his laptop. The program was simple but clever. Instead of trying to fix the corrupted software, it would tell the machine to ignore the broken part and use a different path to control the hydraulic system. It was like finding a new route when the main road was blocked. He tested his program 3 times on his laptop before installing it on the machine. His hands were shaking slightly as he uploaded the code. If he was wrong, he might make the problem worse. If he was right, he could save the company thousands of dollars and get the production line running again. Marcus pressed the enter key and held his breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the machine's computer screen flickered and showed new messages. The error codes disappeared one by one, replaced by normal operating signals. The machine made a soft humming sound as its systems came back to life. Marcus quickly disconnected his laptop and stepped back from the machine. He looked around to make sure nobody had seen him, then walked back to his cleaning cart. His heart was beating fast, but he tried to act normal. He had fixed the machine, but he was not sure what would happen next. When the afternoon shift started, Jake Morrison was the first person to notice that the machine was running again. He stood in front of the control panel with his mouth open, watching the displays show normal operation. The production line was working perfectly, making parts just like it had before the breakdown. Jake called the technicians over immediately. The 3 men looked at the machine with confusion and surprise. They had left it completely broken just an hour ago. Now it was running better than it had in weeks. "Did one of you guys come back and fix this during lunch?" Jake asked. The technicians looked at each other and shook their heads. The oldest one, a man named Carl with 20 years of experience, checked all the connections they had been working on. Everything was exactly the same as when they had left for lunch. "This doesn't make sense," Carl said. "We didn't change anything. The machine was dead when we left, and now it's working perfectly. Jake walked around the machine looking for clues. He noticed that the computer screen showed different messages than before, but he did not understand what they meant. All he knew was that the production line was running again, and that meant the company was making money instead of losing it. Other workers began to gather around the machine, talking quietly among themselves. Word spread quickly through the factory that something strange had happened. The machine that 3 expert technicians could not fix had somehow fixed itself during lunch break. Marcus continued cleaning nearby, listening to the conversations, but not saying anything. He watched Jake Morrison make phone calls to report that the machine was working again. He saw the technicians scratching their heads and checking their tools. Nobody could explain what had happened. After an hour of normal operation, Jake decided to investigate further. He knew that machines did not fix themselves, so someone must have done something. He started asking workers if they had seen anyone near the machine during lunch. Most people had been in the cafeteria or outside the building, but one worker, an older man named Eddie, remembered seeing Marcus near the machine with a laptop computer. "That college kid was over there with some kind of computer," Eddie told Jake. "I thought maybe he was just studying or something. You know how he always has those books with him." Jake walked over to Marcus, who was mopping the floor near the loading dock. The young man looked up with a calm expression, but Jake could see something in his eyes that looked like nervousness. "Marcus, I need to ask you something," Jake said. "Were you near the main assembly machine during lunch today?" Marcus stopped mopping and looked directly at Jake. He had been raised to always tell the truth even when it might get him in trouble. "Yes, sir. I was looking at it for a few minutes." "Did you do anything to it? Touch any controls or connect any equipment?" Marcus hesitated for just a moment. He could lie and probably get away with it, but that was not the kind of person he wanted to be. "I connected my laptop to the diagnostic port," Marcus said quietly. "I thought I might be able to figure out what was wrong." Jake's eyes widened. "You did what?" "Marcus, that machine costs more than most people make in 10 years. You could have damaged it beyond repair." "I was very careful, sir. I just wanted to look at the error codes and see if I could understand what they meant." Jake stared at Marcus for a long moment. The young man did not look like someone who would take dangerous risks with expensive equipment. He had always been responsible and careful with everything he did. "Marcus, I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you actually fix that machine?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I think so, yes, sir. The problem was in the software, not the hardware. I wrote a small program to work around the corrupted code." Jake felt his knees go weak. A 22-year-old college student working as a janitor had solved a problem that had stumped 3 experienced technicians. He had saved the company thousands of dollars and gotten the production line running again. "How did you know how to do that?" Jake asked. "I'm studying mechanical and computer engineering," Marcus explained. "We learned about these kinds of systems in my classes. I recognized the error patterns from a project I did last semester." Jake realized he was looking at Marcus with completely new eyes. This was not just another summer worker trying to make money for college. This young man had skills and knowledge that could be valuable to the company. "We need to go see Mr. Henderson right now," Jake said. "He needs to know what really happened here today." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had hoped to keep his involvement quiet, but now the plant supervisor wanted to take him to see the big boss. He could only hope that Henderson would not be angry about an unauthorized repair to his expensive machine. Marcus walked beside Jake Morrison toward the main office building, his heart beating fast. He had never been inside the executive offices before. Summer workers like him usually stayed on the factory floor and never met the important people who ran the company. Henderson's office was on the 3rd floor, behind a heavy wooden door with gold letters spelling out Chief Executive Officer. Jake knocked twice and waited for permission to enter. "Come in," Henderson's voice called from inside. The office was bigger than Marcus's entire dorm room at college. Expensive furniture filled the space, and the walls were covered with awards and pictures of Henderson shaking hands with important-looking people. Behind the large desk sat Henderson himself, still wearing his expensive suit and looking impatient. "What is it, Morrison? I'm busy trying to figure out how much money we lost today because of that machine breakdown. Jake cleared his throat nervously. Actually, sir, that's why we're here. The machine is running again. It's been working perfectly for the past 2 hours. Henderson looked up from his papers with surprise. The technicians finally figured it out. About time. That Carl has been working here for 20 years. He should have fixed it hours ago. Well, sir, that's the thing. The technicians didn't fix it. This young man did. Jake pointed to Marcus, who was standing quietly by the door. Henderson looked at Marcus like he was seeing him for the first time. Him? Isn't he one of the janitors? He's a maintenance worker, sir. His name is Marcus Williams. He's a college student working here for the summer. Henderson frowned. I don't understand. How could a college kid fix a machine that 3 experienced technicians couldn't repair? Jake explained what had happened during lunch break. He told Henderson about Marcus connecting his laptop to the machine and writing a computer program to fix the software problem. As Jake talked, Henderson's expression changed from confusion to disbelief. You're telling me that this janitor rewrote the machine's software without permission? He could have destroyed millions of dollars of equipment. Marcus finally spoke up. Sir, I was very careful. I tested the program multiple times before installing it. I knew the risk, but I also knew what was wrong with the machine. Henderson stared at Marcus for a long moment. And just how exactly did you know what was wrong? I'm studying mechanical and computer engineering at State University. I've worked with similar systems in my classes. When I saw the error codes, I recognized the pattern from a project I did last semester. Henderson leaned back in his chair. He was having trouble believing that a temporary worker had solved a problem that had cost his company thousands of dollars and hours of lost production. Show me, Henderson said finally. I want to see exactly what you did. The 3 men walked back to the factory floor, where the machine was still running smoothly. Marcus pulled out his laptop and connected it to the diagnostic port again. He showed Henderson the original error messages and explained how the corrupted software was causing the mechanical systems to fail. The technicians were looking for broken parts, Marcus explained, but the parts were fine. The problem was that the computer controlling the hydraulic system had bad instructions. It was like trying to follow directions to a place when half the street names were wrong. Marcus then showed Henderson the program he had written. It was only 50 lines of code, but it elegantly solved the problem by creating a new pathway for the computer to control the hydraulic systems. Henderson studied the code on Marcus's laptop screen. He did not understand programming, but he could see that the solution was clean and professional. This was not the work of someone just playing around with computers. How long did it take you to write this? Henderson asked. About 30 minutes, sir. Most of that time was spent testing it to make sure it would work correctly. Henderson felt a strange mix of emotions. He was impressed by Marcus's skill, but also embarrassed that he had treated such a talented person like an unimportant worker. He had spent the morning yelling at expensive consultants while the solution to his problem had been standing right there with a mop. Morrison, I want you to write up a report about this incident, and I want Williams here to get a bonus for saving the company money. Henderson looked at Marcus. $500 should cover it. Just remember to stick to your regular duties from now on. We can't have maintenance workers playing with expensive equipment without supervision. Marcus felt disappointed by Henderson's response. He had hoped that fixing the machine would show his value to the company, but Henderson still saw him as just a janitor who had gotten lucky. Over the next few weeks, word spread through the factory about what Marcus had done. Workers who had barely noticed him before now treated him with respect. They asked him questions about broken equipment and listened carefully to his answers. Marcus found himself fixing more and more problems around the factory. A conveyor belt that had been running slowly for months started working perfectly after Marcus adjusted its control system. A packaging machine that jammed twice a day ran smoothly after Marcus reprogrammed its timing sequence. Each time Marcus solved a problem, he saved the company money and improved productivity. The other workers began calling him the fixer and would seek him out whenever something went wrong with their equipment. Katie Sullivan, the head of human resources, started hearing stories about Marcus from supervisors throughout the factory. She decided to look at his employment file more carefully. What she found surprised her. Marcus had excellent grades in engineering school and had won several academic awards. His professors had written recommendation letters describing him as one of the most promising students they had ever taught. This was not an ordinary summer worker. Katie decided to have an informal conversation with Marcus during his lunch break. She found him in the break room, reading a textbook about advanced manufacturing systems. "Marcus, do you have a few minutes to talk?" Katie asked, sitting down across from him. "Of course, Ms. Sullivan. I've been hearing some interesting things about your work here. You seem to have quite a talent for solving technical problems." Marcus smiled modestly. "I just try to help out when I can. I've learned a lot about these systems in school." "Tell me about your family. What do your parents think about you working here instead of taking a regular summer internship?" Marcus's expression became more serious. "My parents are proud of me for wanting to work my way through college. My father especially believes that young people should earn their success through hard work." "What does your father do for work?" "He's in the agricultural business. He owns several farming operations and understands the equipment we make here. He taught me that there's no substitute for hands-on experience." Katie noticed that Marcus was being somewhat vague about his family background, but she did not push for more details. Something told her there was more to Marcus's story than he was revealing. Meanwhile, Henderson was dealing with a serious problem. His biggest customer, Samuel Williams of Williams Agricultural Enterprises, had called to complain about recent delivery delays and quality issues. Williams was threatening to take his business elsewhere, which would be a disaster for Henderson. Manufacturing Williams Agricultural Enterprises bought nearly 30% of everything Henderson's company produced. Losing that account would mean laying off workers and possibly closing part of the factory. Henderson scheduled an urgent meeting with Samuel Williams for the following week. As Henderson prepared for the most important business meeting of his career, he had no idea that the solution to keeping his biggest customer happy was working just 3 floors below his office, wearing work clothes and carrying a mop. The black limousine pulled up to the Henderson Manufacturing Building at exactly 10 o'clock on Thursday morning. Samuel Williams stepped out of the car, followed by 2 men in business suits carrying briefcases. Samuel was a tall, strong-looking man in his 50s with gray hair and intelligent eyes. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and expensive shoes, but his hands showed the calluses of someone who had worked hard his entire life. Henderson was waiting in the lobby, trying to hide his nervousness behind a confident smile. He knew that this meeting could determine the future of his company. Samuel Williams was not just his biggest customer. He was one of the most successful agricultural businessmen in the entire state. "Mr. Williams, welcome to Henderson Manufacturing. I hope your drive was comfortable." Samuel shook Henderson's hand with a firm grip. "Thank you, Richard. I appreciate you making time for this meeting on such short notice." They rode the elevator to the 3rd floor in silence. Henderson could feel the tension in the air. Samuel Williams was known for being polite but direct in business. When he had something to say, he said it clearly and expected honest answers in return. The meeting began in Henderson's conference room, with charts and graphs spread across the large table. Henderson's sales manager and production director joined them, along with Samuel's 2 advisors. For the first hour, they discussed numbers, delivery schedules, and quality reports. Samuel was not satisfied with what he heard. "Richard, your company has been our primary equipment supplier for 8 years. During that time, we've always had a good relationship, but over the past 6 months, things have changed." Henderson felt his stomach tighten. "What specific concerns do you have, Samuel?" 3 late deliveries in the past 4 months, 2 machines that arrived with software problems that took weeks to fix, and last week's production shutdown that delayed an order we needed for spring planting season. Samuel's voice remained calm, but Henderson could hear the disappointment behind his words. "I've been approached by your competitors, Richard. They're offering me better prices and guaranteed delivery dates. I need to know why I should continue doing business with Henderson Manufacturing." Henderson tried to explain the recent problems, but his excuses sounded weak even to himself. The truth was that his company had grown too fast and was struggling to maintain quality while meeting increased demand. But he could not admit that to his most important customer. "I understand your concerns, Samuel. We've had some temporary setbacks, but I assure you that Henderson Manufacturing is still the best choice for your equipment needs." Samuel listened patiently, but Henderson could see that he was not convinced. After 2 hours of discussion, Samuel made a request that surprised everyone in the room. "Richard, I'd like to tour your factory floor. I want to see your manufacturing processes firsthand before I make any final decisions about our business relationship." Henderson felt nervous about the factory tour. The production floor was busy and sometimes messy, not the kind of place where he usually entertained important customers. But he could not refuse Samuel's request. "Of course. I'll personally show you around and introduce you to our key personnel." They left the conference room and took the elevator down to the factory floor. The noise hit them as soon as the doors opened. The sound of machines running, metal being cut and shaped, and workers calling instructions to each other over the industrial din. Henderson led the group through the main production area, pointing out different machines and explaining how they worked. Samuel asked detailed questions about manufacturing processes, quality control procedures, and worker training programs. His questions showed that he understood industrial operations better than most factory owners. As they walked through the facility, Samuel paid close attention to how the workers performed their jobs. He noticed which employees seemed engaged and motivated, and which ones appeared to be just going through the motions. He had learned long ago that the attitude of workers usually reflected the quality of management. They were passing through the maintenance department when Samuel noticed a young man working alone on a complex piece of equipment. The worker was completely focused on his task, using both hand tools and a laptop computer to diagnose a problem with an automated assembly unit. Something about the young man's posture and the way he moved his hands seemed familiar to Samuel. When the worker looked up from his task, Samuel stopped walking and stared at the familiar face. It was Marcus, his son, dressed in work clothes and holding a wrench in his hand. Marcus was equally surprised to see his father standing there with Henderson and the group of business executives. For a moment, neither father nor son spoke, both trying to understand what the other was doing in this place. Henderson noticed that Samuel had stopped moving and was staring at one of the maintenance workers. "Is everything all right, Samuel?" Samuel recovered his composure quickly. "I'm sorry, Richard. That young man working on the machine, he looks familiar. Could I speak with him for a moment?" Henderson looked at Marcus and frowned. He recognized him as the college student who had fixed the main assembly machine a few weeks earlier. "That's just one of our temporary workers. His name is Marcus Williams. He's a college student working here for the summer." Samuel's eyebrows raised slightly when he heard the last name, but he kept his expression neutral. "Williams? That's an interesting coincidence. I'd still like to talk with him about the work he's doing." Henderson was confused by Samuel's interest in a temporary employee, but he could not refuse his most important customer's request. "Of course, Marcus, come over here, please." Marcus wiped his hands on a shop towel and walked over to where the group was standing. He looked directly at his father, and Samuel could see intelligence and maturity in his son's eyes that made him proud. "Marcus, this is Samuel Williams, one of our most valued customers. He'd like to know about the machine you're working on." Marcus shook hands with his father, both of them maintaining the pretense that they were strangers. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Williams. I'm working on a hydraulic control system that's been having intermittent failures. The problem seems to be in the pressure regulation software." Samuel asked several technical questions about the repair, and Marcus answered each one with knowledge and confidence that impressed everyone listening. Henderson watched the conversation with growing amazement, realizing that this temporary worker understood the equipment better than some of his full-time technicians. "You seem to know quite a lot about these systems for a college student," Samuel said to his son. "I study mechanical and computer engineering, sir. These machines are similar to equipment I've worked with in my classes." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "And what are your plans after graduation?" Marcus glanced at Henderson, then back at his father. "I hope to work in the agricultural equipment industry, sir. I think there are a lot of opportunities to improve farming, technology." Samuel smiled slightly, but Henderson missed the significance of the expression. "That's an admirable goal, young man. The agricultural industry needs more people with your kind of technical knowledge. After talking with Marcus for 10 more minutes, Samuel thanked him, and the group continued their tour. But Samuel's mind was no longer focused on manufacturing, processes, or quality control procedures. He was thinking about his son, working anonymously in this factory and being treated as nothing more than temporary help by Henderson. As they finished the tour and returned to the conference room, Samuel began forming a plan that would teach Henderson an important lesson about recognizing talent and treating all employees with respect. Back in the conference room, Henderson felt more confident than he had all morning. The factory tour had gone well, and Samuel Williams had seemed impressed with their operations. Maybe he could save this business relationship after all. Samuel sat quietly at the large table, his hands folded in front of him. His two advisors waited patiently for him to speak, but Samuel seemed lost in thought. Henderson and his managers exchanged nervous glances, wondering what their most important customer was thinking. Finally, Samuel looked up and spoke in a calm, measured voice. "Richard, before we discuss our future business relationship, I'd like to ask you about something. How does your company identify and develop talented employees?" Henderson was surprised by the question. He had expected to talk about prices, delivery schedules, and quality standards, not human resources policies. "Well, Samuel, we have excellent programs for recognizing and promoting our best people. We believe in developing talent from within the organization. Every employee has opportunities to advance based on their performance and dedication." Samuel nodded slowly. "That's interesting. Can you give me some specific examples of how this works in practice?" Henderson launched into a prepared speech about the company's training programs, promotion policies, and employee recognition awards. He talked about performance reviews, skills assessments, and career development plans. As he spoke, he felt pleased with how professional and forward-thinking his company sounded. "Those all sound like excellent policies," Samuel said when Henderson finished. "Now let me ask you about a specific employee. What can you tell me about that young man we met in the maintenance department?" "Marcus Williams." Henderson was puzzled by the question. Why was Samuel so interested in a temporary worker? "Marcus? He's just a college student working here for the summer. He does basic maintenance, work, cleaning, simple repairs. He's a decent enough worker, I suppose, but he's not really part of our permanent staff." "I see. And what do you know about his skills and abilities?" Henderson shrugged. "Not much, really. He fixed one of our machines a few weeks ago when our regular technicians were having trouble with it, but that was probably just beginner's luck. These college kids sometimes think they know more than they actually do." Samuel's expression remained neutral, but his advisors could see something changing in his eyes. "Beginner's luck?" From what I observed during our conversation, he seemed quite knowledgeable about hydraulic systems and computer programming. "Well, yes, he has some basic technical knowledge from his classes. But there's a big difference between classroom theory and real-world industrial experience. He's just a temporary employee, Samuel. I'm not sure why you're so interested in him." Samuel stood up and walked to the window overlooking the factory floor. He could see workers moving between the machines, including Marcus, who was back at work on the hydraulic system. For a moment, Samuel felt proud watching his son solve complex technical problems with skill and confidence. "Richard, let me tell you a story," Samuel said, still looking out the window. 25 years ago, I started my first farming operation with nothing but a small loan and a lot of determination. I made every mistake you can imagine, but I learned something important along the way. Henderson listened carefully, not sure where this conversation was going. "I learned that success in business comes from recognizing talent wherever you find it. Some of my best managers started as seasonal workers. Some of my most innovative ideas came from people that other employers had overlooked or underestimated." Samuel turned back to face Henderson. "I also learned that how you treat people says everything about your character and your company's values." Henderson felt a chill run down his spine. Something in Samuel's tone had changed, and he sensed that the conversation was about to take a serious turn. "Samuel, I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at." Samuel walked back to the table and sat down, looking directly at Henderson. That young man you just described as a temporary employee with beginner's luck? The one you think is just doing basic maintenance work? That's my son. The words hit Henderson like a physical blow. His face went white and his mouth fell open. Around the table, his managers looked shocked and confused. Your son? Henderson managed to whisper. Marcus Williams is my son, and the heir to Williams Agricultural Enterprises. He's also one of the most promising young engineers in the agricultural technology field. He chose to work here anonymously because he wanted to gain real-world experience without trading on his family name. Henderson felt like the room was spinning. The college kid he had been treating as an unimportant temporary worker was the son of his biggest customer. The young man whose abilities he had dismissed was the future leader of a multi-million-dollar agricultural empire. Samuel, I had no idea. He never said anything about being related to you. Of course he didn't. That was the whole point. Marcus wanted to prove himself based on his own merit, not because of who his father is. And from what I've seen today, he's done exactly that. Samuel's voice became firmer. But what disappoints me, Richard, is how you've treated him. A young man who saved your company thousands of dollars by fixing a machine your experts couldn't repair. Someone who's been solving technical problems throughout your facility for weeks. And you dismiss him as just a temporary worker with beginner's luck. Henderson felt sick to his stomach. He realized that every interaction he'd had with Marcus was now being viewed through a completely different lens. Every dismissive comment, every condescending attitude, every failure to recognize Marcus's contributions. Samuel, please let me explain. If I had known who he was. That's exactly the problem, Richard. Samuel's voice cut through Henderson's attempt at an excuse. You should treat all your employees with respect and recognize their talents, regardless of who their parents are or what their current job title happens to be. Samuel stood up again and began packing his papers. The young man you've been overlooking is going to inherit a company that buys millions of dollars worth of equipment every year. He's going to be making purchasing decisions for one of the largest agricultural operations in the state. And based on what he's experienced here, what do you think he's going to recommend? Henderson realized that he had not only insulted his biggest customer's son, but had also potentially lost future business worth millions of dollars. Marcus would graduate from college in less than a year and would likely join his father's company in an important position. Samuel, please. I know, I made mistakes, but we can fix this. Let me make it right. Samuel paused at the door. Richard, I'm not going to cancel our existing contracts immediately. That would hurt your workers, and they don't deserve to suffer for management's failures. But Henderson Manufacturing will not receive any new orders from Williams Agricultural Enterprises until you prove that your company has changed. Henderson felt desperate. What do you want me to do? Start by recognizing the talent you already have. That young man down there has been solving problems and improving your operations for weeks, and you've barely noticed. If you can't see the value in employees like Marcus, how can I trust you to provide value to my company? Samuel opened the door and then turned back one final time. I'll give you some advice, Richard. The person you underestimate today might be the person you need tomorrow. True leadership means seeing potential in people regardless of their current circumstances. As Samuel and his advisors left the building, Henderson sat alone in the conference room, staring at the factory floor below. He watched Marcus working on the hydraulic system, seeing him with completely new eyes. The young man he had dismissed as unimportant was actually one of the most valuable people in the entire building. Henderson realized that he had learned a lesson that would change how he ran his company forever, and he hoped it wasn't too late to repair the damage he had done through his blindness and prejudice. Marcus continued working, unaware that his father had just delivered the most important business lesson of Henderson's career. But he would soon discover that everything was about to change both for him and for Henderson Manufacturing Company.